The Hunger Project, 6,200,000 individuals committed to the end of world hunger, is proud to present a global satellite event broadcast live via radio and television to 75 countries throughout the world. The announcement of the winner of the 1990 Africa Prize for Leadership for the Sustainable End of Hunger. During the next hour, live from Prague in the Czech and Slovak Federal Republic, President Václav Havel. From the International Conference Center in Harare, Zimbabwe, the 1988 Africa Prize laureate, President Robert Mugabe, and the Global Executive Director of the Hunger Project, Joan Holmes. And from United Nations headquarters in New York, the Chairman of the Africa Prize Jury, the Honorable Bradford Morse, and your Master of Ceremonies, the Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to be with you today for the cause of Africa, for the cause of leadership, for the cause of ending humanity's oldest and deadliest enemy, the needless tragedy, hunger. I would ask all of us here now in New York and around the world to stand and acknowledge the life and legacy of the late Congressman, the champion, Mickey Leland. We pause to acknowledge a champion, a hero, the late Congressman Mickey Leland. This time, a year ago, he was scheduled to introduce me to speak to this body in Washington, but could not make it because he was fighting for legislation to end hunger on Capitol Hill in Washington. Because of his work, I urged us on that occasion, the whole international community, even then to recognize his very special work. Little did I know that in a matter of days, on a mission to Ethiopia to feed the hungry, that he and members of his staff would perish. His legacy remains with us. We feel his wondrous spirit in the most acute way today. Let the whole world give Mickey Leland a great round of applause. Let's hear it for Mickey Leland. 10,000 of us are gathered today in 100 cities, in 30 countries, north, south, east, and west. We're gathered in Lagos, in London, in Bombay, in Tokyo, in Prague, in Washington, in Moscow, in Oakland, as well as Paris and Harare and Kinshasa. Millions more of us are seeing or hearing this broadcast in 75 countries. We include diplomats, corporate sponsors of the Africa Prize, journalists, representatives of the UN and non-governmental organizations, educators, members of Rotary and other service clubs around the world, students, government officials, and scholars. We are all participating in this event today, not primarily to learn the winner of an important award and to honor an outstanding leader. We're here to demonstrate our solidarity with millions of people who day after day are struggling to build a future for themselves and their families. People who only need a chance, the opportunity to lead healthy and productive lives. We're all participating today in this event to make a difference. We have with us today a tremendous woman. Today we go to Harare, Zimbabwe, to hear from the Global Executive Director of the Hunger Project, Joan Holmes. Joan has led the Hunger Project from its inception 13 years ago, building it into the worldwide movement it is today. She is a leader in the community of organizations in international development and is one of the world's leading voices for the end of hunger. Ms. Joan Holmes.
Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, honorable ministers, Your Excellencies, Hunger Project participants around the world, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be here in Zimbabwe for the announcement of the winner of the 1990 Africa Prize for Leadership for the Sustainable End of Hunger. Mr. President, on behalf of the Hunger Project, I thank you for your gracious hospitality in making Harare available for this historic occasion. It is a privilege to be in Zimbabwe in the year of the 10th anniversary of your independence. I'm also honored to be in the region of the world, Southern Africa, that has produced one of the great heroes of our time, Mr. Nelson Mandela. Ladies and gentlemen, to stand for the end of hunger is to stand for a world of justice, self-reliance, and peace. To stand for the end of hunger is to stand for an Africa free from apartheid. There is no more appropriate country in the world to host an event honoring leadership than Zimbabwe. Leadership for the end of hunger. In just 10 years, Zimbabwe has become one of the most productive agricultural nations on the continent of Africa. And it is pointing the way of what must and can be done in health, education, and family planning. Nothing speaks more eloquently of how well a country is progressing in its commitment to meeting the well-being and the well-being of its people, to meeting the commitments to the well-being of its people, than reducing the infant mortality. Today in Zimbabwe, 40% more infants live to their first birthday than just 10 years ago. Zimbabwe, with an infant mortality rate of 72 per 1,000, could well be the first nation on the African continent to reach that historic milestone, the end of the persistence of hunger, as measured by an infant mortality rate of 50 per 1,000. These accomplishments rightfully belong to the people and leaders of Zimbabwe. They are a testament to the creativity, productivity, and dynamism of Zimbabwe's people. They are also a testament to the wisdom, unyielding commitment, and most importantly, the political courage of one of Africa's great leaders. He is a freedom fighter, distinguished international statesman, and the 1988 laureate for the Africa Prize for Leadership for the Sustainable End of Hunger, President Robert Mugabe. Leadership brought independence to the majority of Africa's people. Leadership will soon bring freedom to all its people. These same qualities of leadership are now needed to wage and win the next great struggle on this continent, the struggle for economic liberation. Leadership requires courage, boldness, and creativity. It requires taking risks and making something happen that would not otherwise happen. For leaders to take on the challenge of the end of hunger, they must have a profound commitment to the health, productivity, and well-being of their people. That focus must be specific and strategic. True leaders for the end of hunger are focused on providing what's missing, the opportunity for hungry people to end their own hunger. It may be a shocking statement to make, but it is nevertheless true. Each year worldwide, 13 to 18 million people die of hunger and starvation because they lack opportunity. 35,000 individuals die each day because they lack the opportunity to be adequately nourished. On the African continent, every minute of every day, 5 children die needlessly. There is no parent in the world who would not keep their babies alive if only they had the chance to do so. Our children are dying because their families have no opportunity to meet their most basic needs. They lack the opportunities that you and I take for granted, the opportunity to learn to read and write, and all the advantages in life that come with being literate. Farmers often cannot grow enough food to feed their families because they lack simple tools, the seeds, the credit that are needed to make their farms viable and productive. Mothers cannot prevent their babies from dying of simple childhood diseases because their communities lack basic health care facilities. And in many regions of the world, including Africa, men, women, and children lack the most basic opportunity, access to safe, clean drinking water. As scientists, researchers, and development practitioners the world over will testify, when hungry people are provided opportunity, they bring their own hunger to an end. True leaders for the end of hunger are leaders who provide hungry people with that opportunity. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, to succeed in the challenge before us, to win economic liberation and to transform the quality of lives for hundreds of millions of people on the African continent, there must be true leaders for the end of hunger in every single sector of society. Political leaders can and must establish priorities for the well-being of their people and allocate the resources, material, financial, human, to ensure those priorities are met. Scientists need to undertake research that is specifically oriented to Africa's problems. They must work hand in hand with Africa's small-scale farmers to discover new and appropriate technologies to grow food sustainably. Business and financial leaders must invest their money and their expertise in the creative energies and the productive capacity of Africa's people. And grassroots leaders, those who have the privilege of working directly with the hungry, they need to enable hungry people to organize themselves in communities of self-reliance, communities in which they are in charge of their own destiny. And women leaders need to empower other women, particularly our sisters who plant, harvest, and prepare the food that feeds the families of Africa. There are those who would say that Africa is a lost continent, that it cannot be economically viable, that it will forever be marginalized. But I have traveled across this beautiful, abundant continent, and I have come to know a different Africa. I have been welcomed into people's homes, walked side by side with men and women in the fields, and sat with nursing mothers as they shared their dreams for their families. I have seen the courage, the resilience, and the dignity of the African people and the unyielding determination of its leaders. Africa's leaders are not daunted by the harshness of present circumstances. They are committed, able, and actively engaged in creating an Africa of the future, an Africa of opportunity, an Africa free from hunger, an Africa that will take its rightful place in the community of nations as we enter the next millennium. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, those of us around the world who have come together today for this event recognize that in ending hunger on the African continent, it is African leaders who will chart the future, provide the vision, and engender a new sense of purpose. At the same time, we recognize that hunger and its eradication is not an issue solely for Africa, for the commitment to the end of hunger belongs to each of us, regardless of our nationality, race, creed, or ideology. For a child who cries out in hunger does not do so as an Indian, as an American, or an Ethiopian. A child cries out in hunger as a human being. It is therefore a profound honor for the Hunger Project, a project that expresses the commitment of millions of human beings around the world to stand in partnership and solidarity with the people and leaders of Africa, and to award the Africa Prize for Leadership for the Sustainable End of Hunger. I thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Today, all of us are committed to the future of Africa, and we face a major question. What will the end of the Cold War mean for Africa? Will it mean, as many fear, that Africa will be further marginalized as international assistance floods to Eastern Europe? Or could it mean that we can build a new, emerging, more vibrant rural community in which Africa can now take its rightful place and make its unique contributions to humanity? We can only hope that the impending disaster in the Middle East will not so radically shift the world's focus to oil that we diminish the importance of blood and the bodies of babies. Ours is a hunger not merely for bread, for man or woman can live by bread alone. It's a hunger for peace. The world military mobilization now in the Middle East must be matched by world mobilization to end hunger in the world. Even now, we must not lose hope. We have two great men, Carl von Schwarzenberg and President Robert Mugabe. Their participation symbolizes the victory of the human spirit demonstrated in their nations today and the possibility of a world where all people are enabled to live free and productive lives. It is now my privilege to introduce a man who is an exemplar of vision and determination, a man who knows the power of truth and the profound difference that the courage, decisions, and actions of individuals can have in world affairs. Chancellor Schwarzenberg. Let's hear it for him.
Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, I'm very sorry first to excuse my President, who for serious reasons couldn't come to the studio now. But I would like to express his wish and the wish of the whole people of Czechoslovakia that the fight against hunger finally succeeds. We in this part of Europe have experienced during the last years that the incredible things become possible and happen. And so I do think that it is really in the power of the world today to end the most shameful thing for our world, that beside of incredible luxury, there are millions and millions who suffer hunger and who don't have a roof above their head. President Havel is known as a fighter for human rights. But do tell me, is there a human right which is greater than the right to eat? We all here in this country are not only opening ourselves towards Europe, not only joining the forces of Europe, but we are joining all the men around the world of goodwill who are trying to help and who are trying in a serious effort to help in all these countries which for different reasons, which are in their history, weren't able yet to fight in the successful way this greatest danger of our world, the hunger of millions. I wish you and all these who engage in this noble fight a victory before the end of this century.
Thank you, Chancellor Carl von Schwarzenberg. We're most honored you could join us today. It is now time to announce the winner of the 1990 Africa Prize for Leadership. For this, I will introduce our distinguished chairman of the international jury, Bradford Morse. As a young man fighting on the fields of battle in World War II, Brad took a stand to devote his life to the service of humanity, and he has never veered from that commitment. His record of service spans the globe. As a United States Congressman, an administrator of the United Nations Development Program, as head of the UN Office for Emergency Operations in Africa. In this latter capacity, Brad personally orchestrated the world's response to the 1984-85 famine in Africa, the largest humanitarian project of its kind ever undertaken, an effort that saved millions of lives. A very special brother. Ladies and gentlemen, Bradford Morse.
Good Lord. Thank you very much, Reverend Jackson. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a high privilege for me to serve as the chairman of the international jury that has been entrusted with the responsibility of deciding upon the award of the 1990 Africa Prize for Leadership for the Sustainable End of Hunger. And I'd like to thank my colleagues on the jury for their extraordinary service. Her Excellency Dame Nita Barrow, the Governor General of Barbados, Dr. Norman Borlaug, the Nobel laureate who is the father of the Green Revolution, Mark Choner, a distinguished citizen of Zambia, His Excellency Edie Omaro, an old friend who was former Secretary General of the Organization of African Unity, and Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, who is responsible principally for the extraordinary progress in agriculture in his home country, India, and is currently president of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. Each year, the Africa Prize for Leadership honors one or more distinguished Africans who have exhibited exceptional leadership to bring about the sustainable end of hunger at the national level, at the regional level, at the continental level. The prize focuses on individuals working in public policy, in the sciences, agriculture, education, health, and local self-help development, and it honors those whose leadership reflects boldness, courage, and creativity. In past years, the Africa Prize has been awarded to a number of outstanding political leaders. His Excellency President Abdou Diouf of Senegal, our host in Zimbabwe today, the president of that great country, the distinguished President Robert Mugabe, and President Kwet Masire of Botswana, who was one of the selectees last year. It's been awarded to one of Africa's most illustrious scientists, Dr. Tom Horiambo, and to Dr. Bernard Ouedraogo, who is the founder and the head of one of Africa's largest and certainly most successful grassroots movements for self-reliance. This year, the jury has once again chosen two laureates for the Africa Prize, laureates who have not only demonstrated outstanding personal leadership, but also individuals who have committed themselves to training and enlarging the capacities of Africa's future leaders. One of our selections is an internationally esteemed statesman, a global thinker, a global force, and a highly successful African farmer. He's a person committed to peace, to constitutional democracy, and to people-oriented development. He is known, respected, and admired throughout the world. The former head of state of Nigeria, General Olusegun Obasanjo. As head of state of Nigeria, General Obasanjo has worked to steer his country away from its dependence on oil exports and toward agricultural production, and his agricultural development movement, Operation Feed the Nation, served to increase the number of farmers and to raise the people's awareness of the key role agriculture plays in the economy. In 1979, after 3 short years as head of state, General Obasanjo kept his promise, the promise he had made to the people of Nigeria, and returned his country to civilian rule. Then, true to his commitment, he took up the honorable profession of farming. A sign at the entrance of his farm, which I visited a number of years ago, reads, "You too can be a farmer. You too can have an exciting occupation. You too can join in feeding yourself and the nation." Recently, as the co-chair of the Commonwealth Group of Eminent Persons, General Obasanjo worked heroically to bring an end to the scourge of apartheid in South Africa, and currently he serves as a leading and influential voice for world peace, as a member of the Independent Commission for Disarmament and Security, and as a member of the Interaction Council of Former Heads of Government. General Obasanjo's courage and his visionary leadership was clearly demonstrated in 1988 when he inaugurated the Africa Leadership Forum, a forum designed to empower young and promising Africans for the demands, for the duties, for the responsibilities of leadership in an interdependent world. His vision of the kind of leadership Africa now requires was most eloquently stated, I think, when he said, and permit me to quote, "Africans themselves have the responsibility for eliminating hunger from their continent. African leaders must lead the way in this and provide an example. African leaders who are imbued with vision, a sense of mission, human understanding, and total commitment to the welfare of their people, this is the type of leadership that is needed in Africa." Our other 1990 selection for the award of the African Prize is a philanthropist, a community, national and international leader, as well as a highly successful industrialist and entrepreneur, Dr. Esther Oklu of Ghana. You know, it doesn't. Yep. I said a year ago it was going to be. Dr. Oklu's own business is focused on those critical aspects of feeding Africa that come after the harvest, food processing and preservation. And in 1942, Esther, with 10 shillings, worth about $2.50 at that time, 10 shillings given to her by her aunt, bought oranges and made 12 jars of marmalade. And today her business packages food and other Ghanaian produce, ranging from fruit juice to soups. Dr. Oklu has been a pioneering leader since the time of Ghana's independence. In 1958, she was the founder and the first national president of the Federation of Ghana Industries. In 1964, she became the first female executive chairman of the Ghana National Food and Nutrition Board. Dr. Oklu has long been committed to providing 2 essential opportunities to African women: appropriate training and access to credit so that they may start their own enterprises. In 1975, Esther Oklu began to share her skills more broadly, and 1978, she founded the Ghanaian chapter of the International Federation of Business and Professional Women, an organization devoted to empowering women in business and the professions. She accepted the request of the African Training and Research Center for Women of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa to assist in the training of women from many countries in processing and preserving food. And at a workshop in Mexico City, preceding the International Women's Year Conference in 1975, she put forth the idea of an international bank directed specifically for women. And 2 United Nations colleagues caught the idea. 3 or 4 of them put together a small committee to develop it. And the result is an institution familiar to many of you today, Women's World Banking. Women's World Banking plays a vital role for the empowerment of women. Historically, women have lacked access to credit because they do not and often were not permitted to own assets that would stand as collateral for loans. Women's World Banking provides guarantees for women who cannot provide collateral so that they are eligible for a bank loan. Dr. Oklu became the first chairman of its board and served in that capacity until 1985. To each of our 1990 laureates, and on behalf of all the members of the international jury, I extend my warmest congratulations. In honoring these outstanding leaders, we know that we honor millions of African men and women whose leadership, whose creativity, whose dedication are forging a new year of progress and hope for Africa's people. Thank you.
It is now my high privilege to introduce to you a man who is truly a leader in the struggle to end hunger throughout the world, a personal friend, a man of integrity, intelligence, involvement, abounding care and character, a man who led the fight for his nation's political freedom and today leads it in building its economic freedom. His vision and his wisdom have energized the people of Zimbabwe to wage their unrelenting and increasingly successful battle against hunger and poverty. As others here have already said, Zimbabwe is one of the great success stories on the African continent. It is a clear demonstration that the first priority of a nation must be the well-being of all of its people. Against enormous odds, including brutal aggression of the apartheid regime against frontline states like Zimbabwe, President Mugabe has built a dynamic, unified, productive society among the diverse racial and ethnic peoples of that nation. President Mugabe and the people of Zimbabwe have shown us that there are proven measures that, when taken, can unleash the productivity of its people. President Mugabe is clearly a wise and effective strategist for the end of hunger, a leader who has had the wisdom to see what must be done and the courage and skill to implement the programs necessary for his people. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce to you the 1988 laureate of the Africa Prize, a man who, through suffering and service and sacrifice, has earned our respect, a man who has chosen redemption over revenge and hope over hurt, the distinguished global statesman who has graciously presided over today's event in Harare, brothers and sisters, President Robert Mugabe.
Ms. Joan Holmes, Global Executive Director of the Hunger Project, Honorable Ministers, the Speaker of the Parliament of Zimbabwe, the Chief Justice, the Chairman of the International Jury of the Africa Prize for Leadership, Honorable Bradford Moss, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, members of the Diplomatic Corps, ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends. I feel greatly honored and privileged to preside over this fourth announcement ceremony of the Africa Prize for Leadership for the Sustainable End of Hunger. 2 years ago, Zimbabwe and the region as a whole celebrated with joy and pride when I was announced as the 1988 laureate of the Africa Leadership Prize. Moments ago, we just had the pleasure of hearing the names of the co-laureates being announced. I congratulate them heartily, and I will shortly comment on their illustrious achievements. However, before I do that, I would like to take the opportunity to share my views on the subject of hunger with all of you. Since the attainment of our independence in 1980, the concern and effort to end hunger has been an integral part of Zimbabwe's development. Indeed, the agricultural sector in Zimbabwe occupies a pivotal position in our national economy and in the SADC region as a whole. Besides being a source of food for our ever-growing population and a source of raw materials for the manufacturing sector, the agricultural sector is the major source of employment and a major source and a major foreign exchange earner for Zimbabwe. Our successes in this sector were achieved by redressing the imbalances of the past. Pivotal to this exercise was the government's desire to increase the national contribution of the peasant sector, who in the past played only a peripheral role in the colonial cash economy. These changes involved improved training, land distribution through the resettlement program, improved access to the agricultural inputs and extension services, and marketing facilities. The Zimbabwe government's agricultural development policy therefore encompasses the eradication of poverty by meeting the basic needs of the rural population, the creation of institutions of grassroots, district, provincial, and central government levels with planning and implementation functions, and finally, the effective and continued utilization of resources for the development of our rural sector. It is gratifying to note that the production of most of Zimbabwe's major agricultural commodities increased significantly over the past 10 years, and we are once more self-sufficient as a nation in most of our food needs, with substantial surplus for export. Despite years of drought, the agricultural sector has responded in an extremely positive manner and has helped lead Zimbabwe back onto the road to economic recovery. African countries, including Zimbabwe, began their independence with high hopes. The ending of colonial rule was rightly seen in a positive light as providing the opportunity for raising the real incomes of the ordinary people of our societies, thus improving welfare. Many African countries rapidly expanded their social services, particularly health and education. It is clear, however, that provision of these services must be based on a strong economic foundation. It is on this issue that we have seen much bitter disappointment in recent years. After initial periods of growth, many African economies fail to sustain the momentum required to maintain their development programs. Over the past decade, many of these countries have seen their incomes per head fall, thereby increasing the phenomenon of hunger and malnutrition, problems that have been aggravated by natural disasters, including droughts and pest infestation, and worsened further by the adverse international economic climate and the continuing debt burden. The initial progress in social development has thus now been eroded. Overall, Africans are hardly any better off today than they were 30 years ago. It has been calculated that for sub-Saharan Africa, overall economic growth has averaged 3.4% per year for the past 3 decades. This is virtually the same as the average rate of growth of the population. The present position is even less encouraging because economic growth itself has declined in Africa and failed to keep pace with growth in population. The achievements on improved food supplies are also far from satisfactory. Agricultural output has grown by less than 1.5% a year, with food supplies per head declining in a most serious manner. Africa's deepening economic crisis is taking a heavy toll in human terms. In a number of countries, the provision of social services has declined. School numbers are down, nutrition is worsening, and in fact, infant mortality continues to be high. All this is occurring in a world which has seen enormous advances in technology. We have witnessed extraordinary developments in genetic engineering, tissue culture, and biotechnology, which has expanded the horizons of farm production to new levels. Yet much of this technology is not utilized where it is needed most, that is, in the developing world. It is gratifying to note, therefore, that those individuals who have made it their mission to fight for the end of hunger in our region are awarded some recognition from time to time. It is in this regard that I feel greatly honored and privileged to have this opportunity to congratulate the 1990 co-laureates of the Africa Leadership Prize for the sustainable end of hunger. The former President of Nigeria, General Olusegun Obasanjo, and Mrs. Esther Afua Oklu, Managing Director of Kuleni Industries of Ghana, and founder and first chairperson of the Board of Women's World Banking. General Obasanjo is a respected international statesman, distinguished leader, writer, and farmer. In all these areas, he has reflected the aspirations of Africa. As a man of vision and abundant energy, General Obasanjo has demonstrated that action should lie at the heart of leadership, particularly in the field of agricultural development. As the head of state of Nigeria, General Obasanjo worked to steer his country away from its dependence on oil exports to agricultural production. His agricultural production movement, Operation Feed the Nation, served to increase the number of farmers and to raise the people's awareness of the key role agriculture plays in the economy. On retiring from the army and politics, General Obasanjo took up farming. He currently manages a large agricultural enterprise, including a very large model farm in Nigeria, which I'm told has, among other things, over 600,000 chickens. Indeed, his farm has become a model of high productivity in its own agroecological zone. General Obasanjo has been in the forefront of the fight for development, emphasizing the importance of rural development and grassroots decision-making. A recent personal initiative which demonstrates General Obasanjo's dedication to Africa is the founding of the Africa Leadership Forum in 1988. A private institution, the forum holds a series of regular conferences and seminars to prepare potential leaders who will be able to cooperate across national, regional, and institutional boundaries in the search for solutions to African problems. The forum has become a major international arena for approaching Africa's problems. General Obasanjo has also served on a number of commissions, including the Independent Commission on Disarmament and Security, the UNESCO Commission for Peace in the Minds of Men, and the WHO Committee of Experts on Effects of Nuclear Weapons. More recently, General Obasanjo was a member of the United Nations Secretary General's Expert Group on Commodities, whose charge it was to find for Africa fair and profitable alternatives to the present international commodities exchange system. In our Southern African region, he is particularly remembered as the co-chairman of the Commonwealth Eminent Persons Group on South Africa, which, among other international initiatives, has contributed to the current dialogue and peace process in South Africa. A philanthropist and a community organizer, as well as national and international leader, Mrs. Esther Oklu has risen to become a highly successful woman, industrialist, and entrepreneur. An expert on food preservation and packaging technologies, she has labored to reduce post-harvest wastages and improve the quality and availability of foods in Ghana. Mrs. Oklu has dedicated her life to improving the status and prospects of business women in Africa and indeed throughout the world. Mrs. Oklu has demonstrated her leadership through active involvement in many national organizations. Concerned that her country should be self-sufficient in food and other products, she formed as well as served as the first president of the Federation of Ghana Industries, now the Association of Ghana Industries, an organization devoted to improving the industrial base of Ghana. She has also held the position of executive chairperson of the Ghana National Council of Women in Development and has acted as an advisor on small and cottage industries. In 1978, Esther Oklu founded the Ghanaian chapter of the International Federation of Business and Professional Women, an organization devoted to helping women in business. Under Mrs. Oklu's direction, the group trained many Ghanaian women in food preservation, appropriate technologies, and management techniques, substantially increasing the quality of many foods, including smoked fish. Once again, under her presidency, the Ghana business and professional women used their own funds to secure loans for business women. In 1975, she and colleagues from other countries created the Women's World Banking, an international institution which guarantees loans for business women all over the developing world. Thus, against the background of a male-dominated society, and in spite of cultural and other impediments, Mrs. Oklu has achieved a major feat for women in general and African women in particular. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to congratulate the two 1990 laureates of this prestigious Africa Prize for Leadership for the Sustainable End of Hunger. Their sterling efforts have brought to the forefront not only the awareness of the existence of hunger in all nations, but also the need to take practical steps to end hunger in Africa and in other parts of the world afflicted by this scourge. I thank you.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, we are approaching the close of today's program. We are very honored indeed that His Excellency the President graced today's proceedings with his presence, and on behalf of all of us here and all those who heard you around the world, Mr. President, permit me to express our appreciation to you. Thank you. I would ask you, ladies and gentlemen, please, that we all remain here for a moment for the departure of His Excellency, the President. Would you please rise? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I do have one final announcement, though, before we close. With us today, I know, are many journalists who have specific questions. Representatives of the...
This concludes today's Hunger Project broadcast. The Africa Prize will be presented at a ceremony in New York City on the 27th of September. This year's ceremony is timed to coincide with the historic UN World Summit for Children. To call attention to this summit, citizens around the world are invited to participate in candlelight vigils on September 23rd. For information about these and other activities in your area, contact the Hunger Project, 1 Madison Avenue, New York, New York, 10010. Major funding for the 1990 Africa Prize for Leadership is provided by Akebono Foods and the Seiki community. Thank you very much for joining us.